Let's start with a brief introduction. There is a moment on a poisoned mountain where a man goes down onto his knees in front of the thing that raised him. He has spent decades preparing for that climb. He arrives alone, and he arrives broken, and somebody else finishes the work for him. Everything this man becomes over the next 10,000 years is already sitting in that moment. The oath, the plague, the fortress on the dead world, all of it. This is the 10th transmission on VOX-OVERRIDE, and the 6th in the primarch cycle. And of the sons we have taken apart so far, this one is the hardest to condemn, because almost every terrible thing he did in the name of setting people free. Mortarion, the faithful son. Who Mortarion is. Mortarion, known also by two names given to him rather than chosen, the Pale King and the Death Lord, and after his ascension to demonhood, the Prince of Decay. Let us go back to the moment the Primarch's capsules were scattered across the galaxy. Mortarions came down on the world of Barbarus. And Barbarus is worth describing precisely, because almost everything the man became was set there. Barbarus. It was a death world, in the technical sense and in every other. A feudal, half-feral place of crude heavy industry, black powder weapons, and primitive respirators, wrapped almost entirely in clouds of toxic fog. And the poison was stratified. The higher a man climbed, the worse the air became. In the mountains, the concentration was lethal to anything that breathed. Remember that, because on Barbarus, altitude is not geography. Altitude is power. The Overlords and the farmers. By the time Mortarion arrived, Barbarus was divided into two castes. The first were the Overlords. Monstrous, more than human, or other than human, and armed with supernatural arts. They built their fortresses on the mountain peaks, where the air itself defended them, and among those arts was the ability to raise the dead. It is for this that they were called necromancers, and the word is meant literally. What rose again was something close to a corpse thing. No higher function remained in it at all. The second caste on the planet had no name of its own. Ordinary human beings, farmers for the most part, living in the valleys and salt flats below, where the vapors were survivable, rather than instantly fatal. The Overlords exploited them without mercy, and killed them very often for sport. And the chief sport on Barbarus was war. The Overlords fought each other constantly. It was a feudal world in permanent anarchy, and they waged their wars across the whole face of it. Nikaea finds the child. It was after one of those battles on a field where nothing living remained, where nothing living should have remained, that the greatest of the Overlords found a screaming infant, in a place where a grown man's lungs would have failed inside a minute. That Overlord was named Nikaea. He took the child up, intending on every reading to make it the heir he had never had. It was Nikaea who named him Mortarion, that which is born of death. You will also see it rendered as child of death. The sources differ on the phrasing and agree entirely on the meaning. Nikaea housed him in one of the high towers, where the poison was thick enough that the boy had to spend his whole body's reserve simply to keep breathing. Nikaea himself lived higher still. In air nothing else on the planet could survive, not even Mortarion. And there is a reading, not a record, that Nikaea kept the boy close enough to shape and far enough away to be safe from, because he feared him. The boy became a youth faster than any mortal, and a man faster still, and learned everything put in front of him. If Nikaea suspected that one day this creature would take his place by force, then the obvious question is why he let him live at all. And the answer, I suspect, is that on Barbarus nothing lasts. Least of all, power. The question with no answer. Mortarion learned quickly. The martial arts, tactics, strategy, statecraft. Nikaea taught him all of it. And there came a point at which the Overlord had nothing left to teach. So Mortarion asked the question, why are the Overlords like this? Why do they fight one another without end? Why do they hunt people who hold no power of their own, kill them, and raise them again to fill out those armies? Nikaea did not answer. And my reading is that he did not answer because he could not. That cruelty was thousands of years deep in the making of that world. They did not know another way to exist. It is not that they refused to imagine one. I do not think they could. The silence did not satisfy Mortarion. He killed the guards in his own tower, dead men, of course, and went down into the lowlands, away from his adoptive father, the people of the plains. And what he found astonished him. The people of the valleys were entirely ordinary human beings, not the witless degenerates Nikaea had described to him. Mortarion heard honest laughter for the first time in his life and saw people who were happy while the air around them bloomed with poison. But they did not want him because of what he was to look at, a tall, pale, gaunt figure walking down out of the mountains where nothing human came from. He frightened them, and that was the whole of it. So he worked, doggedly in the fields, alongside them, trying to become one of them, trying to earn a home and a people of his own. The first kill. What changed it was a single day. One of the Overlords came down on the settlement, and the future primarch did not stand aside. He took up a scythe and cut down the risen dead, reaping them with such ease that he might have been death itself, walked out of some old story. And when the Overlord withdrew into the fog, climbing where no ordinary man could follow, Mortarion followed. He came back down having killed it, and that is the moment the record marks. Not the first Overlord ever to die, but the first to fall to human hands in generations. After that, the village looked at him differently. They respected him. They followed him. He began making speeches, political speeches, frankly, about throwing off the tyranny, and he began teaching them to fight. And men from the other villages started arriving. The Death Guard. They called him the Pale King, leader of the people of the plains, and he began traveling the planet himself, gathering everyone willing to fight. This war took decades. The villages became fortresses. The farmers learned to fight as an army, to hold formation, to maneuver, to think tactically. Hundreds of engagements across a generation of grinding methodical war. But the central problem stayed where it was, the fog around the mountains. So Mortarion took the hardiest of his warriors up into the toxic foothills for short periods, and each time made them stay a little longer until they built a tolerance to it. Not immunity. Tolerance. And on top of that, he engineered filtration gear. He designed armor and weapons too, but the masks were the decisive invention. Together they let the Death Guard, as he now called them, climb into air that had been the Overlord's single greatest defense and put their fortresses under assault. And one by one, those fortresses fell. There is one more thing that made it possible, and it is worth naming because it recurs later in his life at a much larger scale. The Overlords never managed to combine. Not against him, not against anything. They went on fighting each other while he took them apart one at a time. By the end, every fortress on Barbarus had fallen but one, Nikaea's, ringed by the worst air on the planet. The stranger from the sky. Mortarion spent years planning that assault, And when he finally returns to his home village ready to move, they tell him on the road that a stranger has come down out of the sky, promising salvation to everyone. He went to him at once, and he walked into the hall of the village elders and found a man who was his exact physical opposite. Mortarion was what he had always been: tall, lean, unhealthily pale. The stranger was bronze-skinned, perfectly proportioned, and beautiful. Mortarion told him straight away that he had all but freed this planet himself, and it is worth being clear about what he meant. What he had been fighting for was liberation. My reading is that he had no plan beyond it, no intention of unifying anybody, no design for how the world should be governed afterwards, and no wish to govern it. He saw himself as a war leader, not as a ruler in peacetime. Nothing in the record contradicts that, and nothing in it confirms the alternative. Then he declared that Nikaea's fortress was his to take. He had prepared for years. He was ready. And the stranger, without hesitating, offers him a wager. Mortarion goes up alone. If he kills the last overlord of Barbarus, the stranger leaves this world forever. If he fails, he kneels, swears his loyalty, and follows. And this matters. Callous Typhon, the man we know as the first captain of the Death Guard, an old friend, one of the first to join him, told him not to take it. Ignore this stranger. Do what we planned. Mortarion took it. The defeat at the gate. He went up alone, and he climbed further than any mortal had climbed, save Nikaea himself. The toxins ate through his gear. His filtration failed, and somewhere below the summit, his body finally gave out, and he went down onto his knees. And Nikaea came out of the gate to him and smiled, and prepared to keep the oath he had sworn on the day the boy ran, that if his adopted son ever came back, he would kill him. Hold on to this image, because Mortarion never escapes it. Years later, in the warp, Nurgle will make him live this exact moment again. The same gait, the same failing lungs, the same knees in the dirt, and that is the moment the god chooses to close his hand. But that is later, and it belongs later. Here, at the gate, there is no god speaking. There is only a dying man, and the thing that raised him. And Nikaea raises the blade, and doesn't finish it, because the stranger arrives and cuts him down with effectively a single stroke. Mortarion was hollowed out by it. Not because Nikaea was dead. He had spent decades methodically hunting the Overlords, and had sworn to bring death to every one of them. And this last one, his adoptive father, was the whole point of the campaign. He was hollowed out because the kill was taken from him. He had wanted to prove to his warriors, once and finally, that he deserved them, and he was not allowed to. Could the full assault have worked? Probably, and at enormous cost. He had planned it for years, and he was certain, and Mortarion is emphatically not a man who charges in without weighing every option. What we can say is narrower and harder. The stranger's arrival and the stranger's challenge broke his judgment. He went up that mountain alone, which is the one thing he would never have done sober. And he lost. The knee, the legend, and silence. He was furious afterwards. And note that he did not yet know who this was. He knew nothing about him at all. Some man off a mountain, to put it bluntly. And even so, he knelt as he had promised. And then, and only then, did the stranger reveal himself publicly, and Mortarion recognized his father. The primarch takes command of the 14th Legion and renames it without a second thought. The Dusk Raiders become the Death Guard. He comes out before the assembled ranks with the scythe, called Silence. And here I want to be careful, because the story that the weapon once belonged to Nikaea is exactly that, a story. What the sources carry is a dark rumor that silence had once been held by the creature that called itself Mortarion's father. It is repeated because it is too good not to repeat. It is not established. And he speaks to his gene sons and promises them a future in which the Legion brings death to 1,000 worlds. He does not say it is for the glory of the Emperor. He states it as fact. The fracture inside the legend. And in that same moment, a fracture opens. The warriors he raised on Barbarus were devoted to him absolutely. The Terrans, who had been the Dusk Raiders, were less comfortable with how their new commander made war. That fracture matters later, at Istvan III. But let me correct something people repeat, including, in an earlier draft, me. The Purge was not a clean ethnic split. Terran veterans were indeed the ones Mortarion distrusted most, but the force committed to that world was close to 1/3 of the entire Legion, drawn chiefly from the 2nd, 5th, and 7th Great Companies, and it included Death Guard who had never seen Terra in their lives. He did not simply discard the Old World's men, he discarded 1/3 of his Legion, and the finest of the ones who came off Istvan alive, we all know. Nathaniel Garrow, the Knight-Errant, the Great Crusade, and the Brothers. Through the Great Crusade, Mortarion draws closest to Horus Lupercal and Conrad Curzay. Those 3 legions campaign together often, in varying combinations. A note on chronology, because the shorthand people use is wrong. Horus was the first primarch recovered, and by some distance the closest to their father, but he does not become War Master, first among equals in the formal sense, until Ulanor, and Ulanor comes at the very end of the Crusade. Mortarion was found decades earlier. For most of the time these two spent together, Horus was the favored son, not yet the War Master. And Corax and Guilliman each went separately to the Emperor with their misgivings, believing Mortarion more loyal to Lupercal than to his own father. The Emperor waved it away, and the misgivings stayed misgivings. The Way of War. The 14th Legion's doctrine is the thing everyone remembers, and it is worth stating accurately rather than luridly. They were unmatched in chemical and radiological warfare. Alchemical agents, toxic gas, phosphex, contaminated rad shells, weapons other legions used reluctantly, if at all, and which the Death Guard treated as the ordinary furniture of war. But here is what the record also says, and what I got wrong before. The Crusade existed to take worlds, not to sterilize them, and the Emperor set limits on contaminant weapons. Those limits existed, and they applied. What happened in practice is more interesting than nobody objected. The Death Guard were repeatedly sent to the places where the limits had already stopped meaning anything. Worlds so contaminated, so entrenched, so foul, that the usual restraint was beside the point, and where the Legion that could simply walk through poison was the only tool that worked. So no, not every world they touched became a wasteland. They were the instrument reached for when a world was already a wasteland, or about to become one either way. The Commander. And I want to give him the credit the sources actually give him, because it is stronger than the version fans usually repeat. Mortarion was one of the outstanding field commanders of the Great Crusade. Not effective because his men were hard to kill, genuinely gifted. He read the shape of a battle as it moved, and he directed forces across thousands of miles of front and kept them coherent. That is a rarer skill than personal prowess, and a rarer one than brutality, and he had it. There is another detail that tells you what kind of army this was. The Death Guard did not build. They did not garrison. They took a world, replenished on the move, and went on to the next one, a fleet that essentially never stopped. Almost no other legion operated that way for so long. What he actually believed. From the beginning, Mortarion understood his purpose as the liberation of humanity from those who enslave it. That is not my gloss on him. That is close to how the sources put it. Free mankind. Destroy whoever holds it down. Endure any trial and commit any atrocity necessary to win. To him, the scale was irrelevant. A hive city, a planet, a subsector. If people were being owned, then the Death Guard's place was there, and the Death Guard would kill every man who had held his own life above another's. Raised on Barbarus, having watched from childhood exactly what it looks like when human beings own other human beings absolutely, he knew at firsthand what real injustice is, and he set himself against every form of it. And here is the other edge of that. He believed that only someone who has come through inhuman hardship is capable of valuing freedom at all, as his warriors had, as the Death Guard had on Barbarus, which is why he reached for the most destructive weapons available without flinching, holding to one article of faith. Whoever truly wants to survive will survive, and whoever cannot was not going to hold on to freedom anyway. That belief is coherent. It is also the exact mechanism by which a liberator turns into something else, and he never saw it. The legends face a few practical things that people get wrong, including me previously. The armor. The Death Guard fought in bare, unpainted ivory gray ceramite with murky jade markings. That jade is the reference point. It recalls the corrosion-resistant swamp mud the old human Death Guard smeared over their iron plate on Barbarus because it held off the acids in the air. So the Legion's colors are a memorial to a chemical problem, which is very Mortarion. Recruitment. He resisted taking gene stock from anywhere but Barbarus, hard and for a long time, and his other sources dwindled to almost nothing. But only Barbarus ever is too absolute. Under severe attrition, exceptions happened, and the implantation itself. The strongest and youngest of his old human Death Guard were carried over into the Legion by full or partial conversion. And this is the part I want to correct properly, because I had it backwards. Late implantation was not a quiet success story. It killed people. The mortality among those converted past the normal age was high, and the men who volunteered knew it. Typhon was among those raised into the Astartes. This way. The specific ages you will hear quoted for him are not something the record supports, so I am not going to quote them either. What survives that correction is the thing that actually matters. They queued up for it anyway. The hatred of psychers. On Barbarus, at the hands of overlords who commanded supernatural power, Mortarion developed a total hatred of anything resembling psychic ability, which is ironic, and I will come back to why. The Death Guard Librarius was disbanded, eventually, not overnight, and the distinction is worth keeping. But it went, and it went early enough that the Legion fought most of its crusade without one. Nikaea. At the Council of Nikaea, Mortarion was one of the loudest anti-psyker voices in the room, and his testimony was short and concrete. Two corrections to how this usually gets told. He was not the only one making a specific case. Other wordmake, who had served alongside the Thousand Sons, laid out detailed accusations of his own, and others spoke after him. And the claim that Mortarion's speech is what tipped the Emperor is not something the record measures. He was a heavy weight on that side of the scale. How heavy, nobody can say. What is fair to say is why his case landed at all. On Barbarus, he had seen something none of the others had. Magnus had seen a great deal. Magnus had not watched the dead pulled upright and driven against the living, year after year, as an ordinary feature of the world he grew up in, the Heresy. When Horus moved, Mortarion went with him. And here, I need to walk back something I said in the first version of the script. The line you hear everywhere is that Mortarion was the one primarch nobody had to persuade. That is too strong. He was unusually receptive to the argument, certainly. Tell the man who overthrew a tyranny that his father has become a new kind of tyrant, and you are pushing on an unlocked door. But the sources are clear that Horus worked on him deliberately, over time, and was not certain of him for a while. What Horus used was precise. He told Mortarion that the Emperor had dealt with the warp directly and had used the warp to make his primarchs. Aim that at the one son who hated sorcery more than any of the others, and it does the work by itself. And callous Typhon, his first captain and his old friend, had by this point long been in the service of the ruinous powers and had enormous influence on him. So, predisposed and then carefully harvested. Both halves are true. The Second Battle of Prospero. One of the earliest and longest campaigns of the war was against the White Scars after the blockade of Chandax. Jagatai Khan sets course for Prospero to find Magnus, still not knowing who has turned. And as the Khan works out what has happened there, Mortarion teleports in at the head of the Death Shroud, his elite Terminators, carrying Man-Reapers. Mortarion tries to bring him across, not to Horus, note, but to himself. Horus is only the beginning, he says. Together they could build something free of tyranny in any form, the emperors included. And Jagatai understood what was underneath it. He had heard this from his brother before, on Ulanor, and had taken it for talk. But Mortarion meant it. He intended to purge every psyker in the Imperium. And the Khan could see the trap Mortarion was in. After the heresy began, the traitor legions filled up with sorcerers, which left Mortarion unable to find common ground with Lorgar or with Horus himself. He wanted Horus to win and did not want Lupercal ruling what came after. He needed an ally to help him burn the warp out of the legions afterwards, and he was shopping for one. The Khan refused, and they fought. Now, the duel. I told this wrong last time, and it is one of the corrections I most want to make, because the fandom version and the text disagree. It was extraordinarily close, and both of them were spent. But by the moment Mortarion disengages, the tactical advantage is the Khan's. He has an opening, and he is moving into it. Mortarion breaks off, saying the two fleets above Prospero are destroying each other, that this is not what he wants, and not what Horus promised him, and that he will not spend his ships and his men on it, and the Death Shroud vanish in warp transit before the Khan can reach him. So this is not a clean knockout for Jagatai. It is also not, as I previously claimed, a fight Mortarion did not lose ground in. He left it while he still could. That is the honest reading. And it is a better story anyway, because it sets up what happens between these two. On Terra, the Daemon and the Waking Power. After Prospero, Mortarion changed. Not because of the duel so much as because of the conversation. My reading is that he came out of it understanding two things: that he and Horus were not allies and never had been, and that his own strength was not enough for what he wanted. Exactly as the Khan had told him, he was alone. What followed looked from the outside like indiscriminate rage against the worlds of the Crimson King. It was not. In the libraries where the Thousand Sons had gathered their secret knowledge across nearly 2 centuries, Mortarion was hunting for something specific. He found a daemon and took it captive because he wanted the truth out of it. Why had his brothers, Horus, Fulgrim, gone over so readily? What did they think they were being paid? And in that conversation, Mortarion admits that the seed of heresy had been in him long before Lupercal was ever chosen. The demon confirms it and enjoys doing so. His name, it tells him, was written a very long time ago in the empire of one of the true gods on a rusted throne. He is expected. Then it drops the human shape and attacks. And to survive, Mortarion is forced to use the thing he had spent his life suppressing. Here is the correction. I said last time that all the primarchs are powerful psychers. That is a fan generalization, and I should not have said it. The primarchs have a metaphysical dimension, certainly, but that doesn't make each of them a psyker, in the sense Magnus is one. What the sources do establish, specifically about Mortarion, is that there was real psychic potential in him that he refused to touch, and that from this point he starts using knowledge he had spent his whole life declaring forbidden. He tears the demon apart. Its last words are mocking, something to the effect of, "Rejoice, Lord of Plagues," and the man who hated sorcerers becomes one, not because he was seduced, because the alternative was dying on the floor of a library. The realm of the Reaper and the death of Barbarus. Now, a piece of this story I left out entirely last time, and it is the piece that matters most for what the whole lecture is about. Barbarus was not taken from Mortarion by the Emperor. That is the version I told, and it is wrong. After the Emperor came, Mortarion kept his world. It became the recruiting ground of the 14th Legion for the whole of the Great Crusade, the source of every son he trusted. And when the heresy came, Barbarus became the center of his own domain, the realm of the Reaper. He did not abandon the place he had bled for. He made it the heart of what he was building. And then the Dark Angels came. During the passage of the Angels, the Lion's forces destroyed Barbarus and broke that domain apart. So the world Mortarion fought for, the only home he ever chose, was not lost to his father's arrogance at all. It was destroyed in the war he himself chose to join by a brother's legion, which is worse, and it is more his own doing, and any honest reading of this man has to carry it. Typhon's trap and the oath. By the time Horus orders the move on Terra, Mortarion is a formidable sorcerer who still denies serving chaos, and nominally he does not. His first captain does, and what Typhon does next is not the vague, "He chose another route I gave you before." It is a deliberate, methodical piece of treachery, and the detail is the whole drama. Typhon fabricates an accusation against the fleet's navigators. He has them killed. He then announces that his own specialists will guide the Legion and steers it, knowingly, into a trap. Entering the warp, the Death Guard find themselves in an undiluted nightmare with neither time nor direction, and the Destroyer Plague begins to eat the Legion alive. The warriors mutate where they stand. Nothing they know how to do makes any difference, because there is nothing there to fight. Mortarion works out what has happened, and he kills Typhon himself, personally, and Typhon gets up again, because what is in him now is the Destroyer Hive, and it does not particularly care about being killed, and the wheel turns all the way back. Mortarion is choking. He is dying. He is on his knees, and Nurgle gives him that old moment at Nikaea's gate to live through again, in detail, and this time, there is no stranger walking out of the fog to save him. The father who did it once is not coming. That is the entire architecture of the trap, and it is aimed at exactly one wound. So Mortarion swears, not to save himself, to stop what is being done to his legion. And Nurgle answers instantly. The fleet comes out of the warp near Terra, still carrying the name of the 14th Legion. The men aboard are no longer simply Adeptus Astartes. They are, in their own words, blessed, the first of what will be called Plague Marines. And Mortarion becomes a demon primarch, the Prince of Decay. And that is a real transformation, which is another thing I understated last time. This is not merely a man finally opening a door he had kept shut. Demonhood remade him, and it made him vastly more powerful than he had been. He is newly empowered in the most literal sense, and the price is that the empowerment is not his. Terra, the Khan, and the banishment. And so we come back to Jagatai Khan, because these two are not finished. They meet again during the siege, and the ascended Mortarion is simply the stronger of them now, physically beyond what the Khan can match. So the Khan does not try to match him. He goes at Mortarion's pride, which is the one part of a demon primarch that still belongs to the man. He lets himself be drawn. He takes appalling damage doing it, and he gets close enough to banish Mortarion into the warp. Which is why, and this corrects the version I gave you, Mortarion is not there for the end. He does not lead a disciplined withdrawal from Terra after Horus falls. He is already gone, banished before Horus dies, and command of the Death Guard passes to Typhon. The Legion's reputation for coming off Terra in better order than the others is worth keeping. Its Primarch's personal role in that is not. He was thrown off the board by a brother he had once tried to recruit. The Plague Planet. The traitor legions fall back into the Eye of Terror, and there Nurgle has prepared for his champion an entire world, the Plague Planet. And there, at last, Mortarion has a home. Which is the irony this whole story has been walking towards. He becomes Nikaea, a fortress on the highest peak, ringed by air so toxic that nothing but its master can come near, and a lord inside it who does not come out. Though, did not leave it for 10,000 years, was my exaggeration, and the script contradicted itself 2 paragraphs later. For millennia he was profoundly reclusive and rarely involved himself in the materium directly. He did come out, Sanctia, Kornovin, and eventually a war he ran, in person. As for Typhon, he did not renounce the Legion, which is another thing I had wrong. He took the name Typhon, he became a herald of Nurgle. He operates with enormous autonomy at the head of his own splinter fleets, and his relationship with his Primarch is poisonous. But he remains first captain of the Death Guard. That title never went anywhere. Kornovin. In 901 M41, at the Battle of Kornovin, Mortarion kills the Grand Master of the Grey Knights, Gerenitan. His successor, Kaldor Drago, swears vengeance and cuts his way through the Plague Marines alone to reach him. And the part I skipped last time is the part that makes the episode make sense. In a straight fight, Drago loses. He is outmatched, and he knows it. What he has instead is Mortarion's true name. He speaks it, and a name spoken correctly unmakes a demon's hold on the material world. The Prince of Decay comes apart, and as he does, Drago carves Gerenitan's name into his heart, and Mortarion is cast back into the immaterium. So he did not escape. He was unmade and thrown out by a mortal with the right word. No wonder it never stopped burning. The Plague Wars and the gods' disfavor. After the 13th Black Crusade, the Cicatrix Maledictum splits the galaxy in 2, and out of that come the Scourge stars, 3 star systems wholly given over to Nurgle's plagues. From there, Mortarion attacks Ultramar, and the Plague Wars begin, which brings us to Iax. And this is the correction that changes the ending of the whole lecture. So I want to be exact. I told you before that Mortarion and Guilliman were evenly matched, and that the Death Guard then withdrew for no visible reason. Both halves are wrong. Mortarion wins. He beats his brother, and he infects him with the Godblight, and Guilliman effectively dies of it. What brings Guilliman back is not his own strength. It is the intervention of their father, reaching across the galaxy to a son who was, by any ordinary measure, gone. And it is that intervention that forces Mortarion off the world. And there is a second consequence, which is the one nobody expects. Mortarion's conduct in that campaign, his defiance, his failures, and the same with Ku'gath, cost him. He fell out of his god's favor. The most recent official material says it plainly. Nurgle's favorite son is not in favor anymore. Sit with that for a moment, because it retires the tidiest line in the first version of this script. I told you that Nurgle was the one father who never betrayed him. That is no longer where the story stands. Every father Mortarion ever had eventually turned on him, including the one who gave him a home. Reading the character. Everything from here is my reading. I will say where the record stops and I start, because that distinction is the whole difference between analysis and fan fiction. The tragedy of Mortarion rests on two things: the world he was raised in, and an injury done to him by his father. We have no idea what he would have become on Nuceria or in Ultramar. History, even this history, does not deal in what might have been. He landed on Barbarus, a world with no room in it for mercy, where the only survivor was the man who both wanted to survive and could. And compare him to Kurz, who was also dropped onto a brutal world of two opposed factions and an exploited population, and who also raised it in revolt, but who was taken in, let us say, by the better side of it. Mortarion was picked up by the most ruthless creature on his planet, and still had the insight to work out that he was not being told everything. Still ran, because he wanted the truth. Still came back to unify a world for a war of liberation. That is the epic hero, in full. Which is why the oldest warning in the genre applies to him so exactly. Fight monsters long enough, and you become one, or worse. Now, the Emperor. Mortarion had a plan, and was executing it. The Emperor arrived covertly and deliberately provoked him into going up that mountain alone. He played on his son's feelings. In plain terms, he manipulated him. Who is more at fault? The one who manipulated, or the one who let himself be manipulated? Both, in my view, equally. But only one of them had a choice. The Emperor could have helped his son, instead of humiliating him in front of a world that thought that son was its hero. Mortarion, once challenged, could not step back, whatever Typhon advised. Put the Lion, or Russ, or Dorn in that hall, and not one of them steps back either. And this is where the break begins. Not because the fortress fell without him, because his choice was crossed out. He had chosen the fight, chosen his warriors, chosen the people of Barbarus, chosen the total eradication of that regime, and his father canceled it with a smile. Does that justify what he became? No. Does it explain it? Completely. After that day, he had a reason not to trust his father, and, this I state as reading, a reason to hate him. Because having seen what the Emperor could do, having watched him kill Nikaea with one stroke, Mortarion could not avoid the question, why did you not help me, instead of demonstrating that you did not need to? I cannot see another motive. He came, watched his son playing in the sand, said, "Go on then, take it down." And when the boy failed, showed him who the father was. And as a father myself, I cannot make that make sense. Unless breaking him was the point. Then Horus spent years working on an already unstable man. And there is a thematic reading, and I will flag it as one rather than as fact, that Barbarus was Nurgle's from the start, that the Overlords were his, that this was always a farm. The official material describes those creatures as monstrous things wielding supernatural arts. It does not tell us they were his cultists. I find the idea compelling, and I am not going to sell it to you as established. What the record does support is the shape. Pressure from Horus on one side, pressure from the warp on the other, and a man never given a quiet hour in which to look at his own situation clearly. And the break completes with the Khan, when Jaghatai tells him plainly that Horus has been using him exactly as their father did. What Mortarion does next is not surrender. He reaches for the warp specifically so that he can stop being someone else's instrument and start playing his own hand. And he loses, because a man cannot contend with a god. Nurgle gets his champion, exactly as intended. I want to redo the comparison with Fulgrim here, because the version I gave last time does not survive contact with the sources. Fulgrim was possessed after killing Ferrus Manus, but he did not simply vanish into his own body forever. He fought his way back, took control, imprisoned the thing that had ridden him, and then, deliberately and by his own choice, gave himself to Slaanesh. His ascension comes later, through a ritual he pursues. So the neat contrast, Fulgrim the coward, Mortarion the martyr, is not available. The real contrast is narrower and better. Fulgrim, given time and a way out, chose apotheosis. Mortarion was given no time and no way out, and bought his legion's lives with the only currency he had left. Both are damned. Only one of them went looking. Now the sequence. Nikaea, father, master. The emperor, father, master. Horus, then Nurgle. Mortarion's life is a chain of masters and a chain of betrayals. Nikaea intended to use him. The emperor used him. Horus used him. And Nurgle, the one I used to call the father, who never turned on him, has now turned on him too. Which leaves exactly one thing in this man's life that never betrayed him. The people of Barbarus, who did not abandon him, did not use him, and followed him into a war they could not have survived without him. And that world was not taken from him by his father. It was burned by his brother's legion in the war he chose. There is no version of this where he is only a victim. So, a tragic figure, unquestionably, as many of the traitor primarchs are. Worse off than Kurz, who at least understood how the world works. Worse off than Angron, who was not in possession of himself at all. Mortarion wanted a father and a place to call home, and he got 4 masters and a fortress on a dead world. And one last thing. He was not naive, if anyone has taken him that way. He understood how the world is arranged, in some ways better than Kurz did. He knew one simple thing. Whoever truly wants to survive, survives. And whoever wants to and cannot was not worthy of it. He believed that about the galaxy. He believed it about himself. And that is why, at the gate, on his knees, he took the deal. Why, the faithful son. The title today was Mortarion, the faithful son, and it was not chosen by accident. The Russian word I used, predani, carries 3 meanings at once, and English has to split them apart. As an adjective, it means devoted, a faithful friend. As a participle, it means betrayed, the one who was given up. And there is a third sense, consigned. Consigned to the fire. All 3 of them fit him. And by the end, so does the fourth thing the word cannot hold, that he was faithful and betrayed and consigned, and never once in 10,000 years free. Thank you for listening to the very end. If this deep dive was worth your time, drop a like and subscribe. There is far more of the Long War still to explore. Until next time, transmission ends. The Emperor protects.